Come in. Hi, come and have a seat. Just for a moment's leisure here. Remember, the other day I read you that lovely little essay of Hilaire Belloc's about the pleasure of taking up one's pen. And that just put me in the mood for Belloc. And as I explained, I've got mainly Chesterton Belloc along here. So I was reading the other day. Let's put this down for a sec. I was reading, just randomly, this little book of Belloc's essays, which is called Short Talks with the Dead and Others. And it's quite a striking title. This is it's the first edition from 1926, which interestingly has, with Mr. Philip Sainsbury's compliments, so Philip Sainsbury at the Came Press, Kensington, 1926, is the publisher. So obviously this must have been a review copy that the publisher must have sent out to someone. Anyway, it's an interesting title because there's a sense in which every time you pick up a book by an author of the past, you're having a short talk with the dead. In a sense, the dead may be outwardly and bodily so, but their minds and thought and spirit and intent, and of course their very words, their language, are alive to your mind every time you read their books. So all these essays begin with the word talking, talking of, and they're very conversational in style. And it so happened that I picked up the essay here on talking of Byron, and I began to read a few things about Byron. And it immediately made me want to just go and remind myself of Byron and read a bit of Byron. So in a sense, the conversation that Belloc has with me about Byron then becomes my conversation with Byron. And it also becomes one book, in this case, a book over here, suddenly having a conversation with a book over there, as though the conversation between the books happens across the room through the medium of my mind. So I just thought I'd read you a few of the ideas in this little essay about Byron, comments on Byron himself, which then prompted me to pick up the book, and then we'll go and get the book and I'll show you that one. So talking of Byron begins with a feeling that Belloc has, writing in the 20s, that Byron has fallen out of fashion. And he thinks he's fallen out of fashion partly because people say he's been so much prized in Europe, on the continent. And he leads into a discussion of how Byron is differently appreciated in his great European reputation, but also his English one. But then he goes on really to put his finger not just on what he thinks is good and is neglected about Byron, but about what's good about poetry. So speaking about Byron in the English of Byron's day, he says that something in his verse did move them, is abundantly proved. What was it? In the first place, it was the marriage of intelligence with the magic of words. That there is no poetry without magic, all will I repeat agree. Magic is the essence of poetry, as it is still more truly the essence of religion. Magic is that essential which we release when we come to the core of things. And if there be no magic in a religious ritual or a piece of verse, that ritual, that verse are dead. They have not touched the nerve of reality. But whereas the magic of religion is actual, the magic of words is symbolic. There's no magic in words which are not understood. The words are symbols referring to the mind to things experienced. Thus, if you read the words, "And it was dawn upon the sea," the words have no message to one who has not seen or has not at least some hereditary memory of that miracle. Even the music of words and the mystical effect of cadence refer to an emotion experienced apart from the music and the cadence. Now Byron perpetually strikes that note of experience, the experience of men living as the English of his time mostly, and as France, Italy and Spain still mostly live. He struck or recalled or evoked the emotions of men to whom a mechanical industrial life was either unknown or imperfect or irksome. Thus it is the fashion to decry that superb passage upon the sea which begins, "Roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll. But I will bargain that any man not sophisticated, using the sea and hearing those lines for the first time, will immediately respond. The magic in Byron is then a consonance with the things experienced by men who sail the sea in ships, not defiling it with engines, by men who saw the landscape of England, also then undefiled, by men who slept well, ate well, and could drink. It is verse written for men very much alive and normally alive. It is verse written for men who are full of emotion, not jaded nor needing a spur. Here was a man who expressed what men felt, could not themselves express, but desired to hear expressed. He therefore fulfilled the true function of the poet. For the poet, though divine, is a servant. He is the God in the house of Admetus, and not all his fellowship with heaven would make him what he is, did he not bring to birth the struggling song, as yet undelivered in his fellow men. It's pretty extraordinary writing. I mean, obviously it's the the non-inclusive writing of the time, but it's intended to include everybody. But it is just so many fine things to say about poetry. Anyway, I was reading this, and I suddenly thought, do you know, I haven't thought about or read any Byron for quite a while. So I put this one back, and I popped over. Come over here with me. So I thought to myself, where's my Byron? Where's my big collected works of Lord Byron and all the wonderful, rolling, rambunctious, rather raunchy pages of Don Juan? Many of which are in my mind, of course. But I realised that all my Byron, my main Byron, is in boxes in the garage because I moved it out of my study at Girton. But I knew I had a little volume of Byron somewhere, and I found it. It's here among my more precious volumes. And it's really interesting itself. So here we are, look. Byron's Works, Volume 3. It's a lovely leather-bound edition. And, of course, it was affordable because I think it was last signed by an owner in 1903, but it's a much older book than that. Look at this wonderful, wonderful scene. Byronic hero dating woman. But this is just one volume from the works of Lord Byron in 4 volumes. John Murray, who was this great publisher. And as you can see, it's 1830. Well, of course, I couldn't have afforded a really early edition if I'd had all the volumes, but as this was only odd, 1830, £5 this was. Anyway, 1830, of course, do have a seat again. Well, that's only 6 years after Byron's death in 1824. Missolonghi, going to fight for Greek liberation from the Turks. And I like this little small volume. I like Byron was, of course, well, Lady Caroline Lamb famously said he was mad, bad, and dangerous to know. And he was very fashionable to read, but also regarded as a bit risque, a bit dangerous. And I can imagine the ladies who wanted to read Byron, perhaps even some of the men too, wanting to have a discreet little volume of it, which could be tucked into a purse or a handbag or a little satchel when it didn't seem prudent to be seen reading it. In fact, anyway, I want to just test that idea of bringing the song to birth, of saying something with a touch of magic in it, with a sheer beauty, with a kind of utter assurance, a sense of touching the nerve of life, which are all the things for which Belloc praises Byron. Sometimes Byron delivers himself of a lyric which is so perfectly formed that you simply cannot imagine that. You can't even imagine a time when such a lyric didn't exist. It just seems always to have been there, and every word of it seems perfect. And the observations in it are so right, and right first time, as it were. So it happens that the little sequence Hebrew melodies is in here, which are these lovely lyrics set, as it were, in the Levant. His sense of the particular beauties, both of climate and person in the Middle East, and he has a number of lovely poems in this sequence, but this is the first one and perhaps the most famous. she walks in beauty, and is an example of the magical beauty in Byron, I think. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell the days of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. Oh, it's just beautiful. And that lovely idea, you know, she walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. So there's the beauty. There's simply beauty is a thing you walk in, that even the way she walks is beautiful. And then it's the particular night of the Middle East and the Mediterranean, cloudless climes and starry skies. And what's great about that night is both that it is the beauty of its darkness and the brightness of its stars. So you have all of that, and then all that's best of dark and bright, which is in the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. All that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, her whole look, and particularly her eyes. And you know immediately this beautiful woman has dark eyes, but they're bright. And it's just lovely. And the idea that this particular nighttime beauty of this woman is a gift that's denied to gaudy day. There's nothing gaudy or flaunty or showy. There's just a superb natural beauty which comes, as it were, from the nature of both earth and heaven. And, you know, the nameless grace, he calls it, which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face. And then he imagines the person, and there's that sense that there's the simple, beautiful, the beauty made of contrasting light and darkness must be an expression of the soul, the mind at peace with all below, the heart whose love is innocent. It's a fantastic poem. So it's often anthologized by itself, but I picked the book up, and of course I immediately just carried on reading. And then to my amazement, and this is where books do have conversations with each other again, to my amazement, I found the very next one, which I must have read, but only read long ago, but perhaps it stayed somewhere in my subconscious, is the poem about David's harp. It's about King David as the psalmist. It's about the power of the music of the Psalms. The harp the monarch minstrel swept, it's called. The harp the monarch minstrel swept, the king of men, the loved of heaven, which music hallowed while she wept, or tones her heart of hearts had given. Redoubled be her tears, its chords are riven, it softened men of iron mould, it gave them virtues not their own. No ear so dull, no soul so cold, that felt not, fired not, to the tone of David, to the tone, till David's lyre grew mightier than his throne. The lyre of David, the harp of David. Well, it's extraordinary, of course. I sat down and read that, and I thought, well, this is David's lyre, mightier than his throne. There was Byron appreciating the Psalms of David and saying that there's a poetry in them that would make you weep. And here, you know, all these years later, I hold the book in which I've written a fresh sequence of poems, also celebrating the power of David's lyre, and also saying that in many respects his lyre is mightier than his throne, although I say much more than that as well, because in the end I see David's poetry and David's crown as both looking forward to the coming of Christ, and that's all there in the book. So there we are, 3 books. I start with Belloc, it moves to Byron, and then I suddenly realised that Byron's contributed back to something that I've tried to do myself. So the circle dance of literature continues. Thanks for taking a few steps in it with me. Cheers.